UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Well, hey there, baby.
Well, hey.
It's a gremlin-y kind of night tonight. We've had technological misfires.
Yeah.
We've had a guest who hasn't appeared, which we're super looking forward to having on. We are still waiting, but we're not just going to sit here and just wait and talk about nothing. What I will talk about very quickly is being the spooky season and all, our month of Halloween episodes. But of course, next week is our actual, I guess, the proper Halloween episode, really, because it's All Hallows Eve episode happens on the Saturday, and we'll be right. If you're in the Eastern time zone, actually, we'll be starting when Halloween officially starts. And by the time we finish it, if you're in the Central time zone, we'll be able to say Happy Halloween properly as well, because we'll run for that hour. Yeah. But we're having Heidi Erickson on, who we've had multiple times before. She's a wonderful spinner of all kinds of spooky, fascinating tales, and a wonderful mixer of drinks as well. So we'll probably be enjoying a Halloween drink, as I'm sure will Heidi, as she spins tales about Halloween and witchcraft and all kinds of spooky stuff for us and our listeners. But I would encourage people maybe to get in the Halloween spirit, maybe don a costume. I'm serious. I'm going to be in costume for next week's episode. And maybe share your photo of you if you're in a Halloween costume on our Facebook page, Talking Weird page, underneath the show link, which will be at the top of the page where you share the show there. And have a drink with us. And make sure to say hi. We'll acknowledge anybody who says hi next time. Sometimes when we're in a hectic interview or an exciting interview, we don't always talk to everybody. But it being the Halloween show next week, we will.
Be more laid back.
Yeah, whether you pick your favorite beverage, alcoholic or not, and get into the Halloween spirit with us next Saturday night. I'm looking super excited to having Heidi. She's always one of our most fun guests. It's always quite the party when Heidi's on.
Yeah, I want to get me a new drink too. I'm still drinking the drink from St. Patty's Day.
Heidi inspired drink has traveled with you for 9 months.
I'm stuck on it right now.
How long's that?
I drink.
Well, I think since it's the spooky season and since we don't have our guests yet, I made a little video for Halloween this year, which if people really enjoy it, they can go and find it again on either the Talking Weird Facebook page or the Talking Weird's YouTube. And Mothman46, one of our favorite listeners, is preparing his costume as we speak. So please, Mothman, wear it next week and send us a photo of you in it. We'd love to see it. But maybe that video, that 10-minute video I made for Halloween, you can maybe play.
Show it.
Yeah. Don't forget to maybe mute your microphone though, because sometimes we get that double up in sound.
That's right. I will
and if our guest comes on, we'll just come back with him after the video's finished. I think if we start it, we should play it all the way through for our audience. So I hope you think of this as my little Halloween card to everybody this year.
It's good too. He did a very good job.
Well, thank you. I'm blushing now.
You're blushing?
You can't see it under my beard.
Okay, let me find my spot.
Yeah, it's about the true meaning of Halloween a little bit, I think. So
yeah, get that to play, and now I can hear it.
Yeah, you know.
Can you
welcome my cabin in the Northwoods?
Is that
in this innocuous, well-worn little ring case? I can hear it through your microphone as well. I think you'll find it more than a little bit curious. Indeed, some people suggest it's physical evidence for the existence of the fair folk. That's right, of the fairies. But the sun's starting to go down here in the Northwoods, and it can get mighty dark, mighty quick in this part of the world at this time of the year. So I'm going to take it inside and show you there. In the meantime, I suggest you might want to get yourself a beverage, relax and get comfortable, because I've got quite the fairy tale to share with you. Welcome back. It's actually a really appropriate time for us to have this chat and for me to show you what I'm going to show you in that little ring box and tell you the tale I'm about to tell you. Because we've passed the fall equinox here quite some time ago. The days are noticeably getting shorter and the nights are noticeably getting longer. I've harvested almost everything from my garden. I think there's some potatoes left out there. That's about it. The first frost has come. Many frosts have come. And before too long, it's going to be Halloween. Indeed, even the little streets in the smallest town near me are already lighting up with Halloween decorations. So are the couple of stores that are in that small town. And in that small town, like many small towns and suburbs and cities across this great land, it won't be long until those streets will ring with the laughter and shouting of children going door to door, gobbling candy. And that's what we think about when we think about Halloween, right? Trick-or-treating, partying, horror movie marathons. But that's not what we always thought about when we thought about that time of year. My ancestors from Scotland and Ireland, they had a very different idea about what Halloween meant. On All Hallows Eve on Samhain, they'd gather around their small fires, carve grotesque faces into turnips, the precursor to the lopsided, grinning, happy jack-o'-lantern. Their turnips weren't so friendly. In fact, they were created to do something very different than entertain. They were designed to keep away the things that prowled the moors and the glens and the valleys and the villages on All Hallows Eve. Things that would look in the window and maybe take the unprepared. So those turnips were carved to keep away those things. And now we think about maybe it was demons or devils or the spirits of the dead, and sometimes it was. But in those Gaelic-speaking countries, it was more often than not the she, the fair folk, the fairies. Because you didn't want them to come and take you away. And it's ironic the names we have for them. Those names still, they resonate with the sense of familiarity and the idea that somehow we were close and we liked these beings, fair folk, gentry, or the other crowd, which is kind of innocuous. But they were anything but innocuous. You didn't want to say anything bad about them because they had the power to destroy you. And especially on Halloween, but all of the year round, really. The word that we have today, stroke, when somebody has a brain incident or hemorrhage, which often can end their life, certainly if they have a number of them. That initial term comes from the idea that you were stroked by the fairies. The fairies stroked you. Which leads me to what I have to show you in this small box that I have right here. I have to insert a close-up because these things are tiny. It's elf shot. Fairy arrowheads. I have a number of them here. Or so that's what they were meant to be. I inherited this box from my father. He gave it to me before he passed away, quite some time before he passed away, actually. Handed down from generations, at least the contents. I don't know if they're real or whether they're real. They're tiny, arrowhead-like pieces of stone. Perhaps created by the she. Or perhaps found by some dreaming child in some stream long ago, or by some prankster in a gravel pit. Who knows? But people would keep these because they would serve as a talisman, a protective barrier from additional attacks by them. It was both a noun and an adjective, elf shot. This is elf shot. But you could also be elf shot by elf shot. And if you might have a stroke. You might pass away mysteriously. Or they might attack your animals instead if you wronged them. If you wronged the sheep. If you wronged the other crowd. If you wronged the good neighbours. And your cow might become ill and die, or it might just stop producing milk. Or your horse might become lame. Of course, sometimes they take us away as well. You wouldn't want to go to sleep in a fairy ring, or even perhaps step in a fairy ring. A circle of mushrooms where the good folk had danced the night before. You certainly didn't want to encounter them when they were dancing, or when they were prowling the night on a wild hunt, perhaps looking for a fairy lover who had escaped fairyland. Then you would really lock your doors, Halloween or not. And of course, many people have made the comparison that the old fairy lore of missing time and being taken away by diminutive beings bears a striking correlation to alien abduction. And in many ways it does. But most abductees return after a short spell of missing time, perhaps, or when they were sleeping at night. But in many fairy traditions, people didn't return. They disappeared forever. Perhaps a fairy took a liking to them, wanted to make them their lover. Or perhaps they'd offended the fairies. Or for whatever reason, they were gone for good. Or sometimes they would return years later. Many years later. And when I today read tales of the paranormal and the supernatural, sure, again, you can see those correlates with alien abduction. But what I really think about are the type of missing people reports in the works of authors like David Paulides, where people just poof, disappear off the map. Sometimes their bodies are found, or their remains are found, in the same place where skilled rescue teams had scoured previously. Often on paths they'd walked several times, the body returns. Sometimes the body never returns. And so perhaps the fair folk are still with us today. Perhaps they still take us. So as Halloween comes, be particularly careful. When you carve that jack-o'-lantern, maybe think about what it really means. And if you're lucky enough to acquire some elf shot, I'd keep it close. Now, my father, very sadly and very perhaps ironically given this conversation, actually died after having multiple strokes. And this is meant to protect you from such things. But then again, he had given it to me years before the strokes took him. You can't help but wonder if he'd held on to the elf shot, whether the strokes would have passed him by. Anyway, thank you for listening. And until next time, happy Halloween.
Okay.
Well, thanks for playing my little video. It was a little staggered here, so if it was staggered for anybody else, you can always check it out on YouTube as a standalone. Now, has our guest jumped into the green room? No. Well, I guess we talk about Halloween then.
Talk about Halloween.
I suppose so. It is the season to be spooky. It's been a holiday that's always obsessed me. I think one of the reasons it was always so mysterious for me is I grew up in a country where it wasn't really practiced. You know, when I was a kid, my Halloween experiences weren't the same as most other children in America. Thank you, Mothman 46. I appreciate the kind of words for the video. My experiences weren't like most Americans. You know, I didn't grow up where all the stores were decked out with Halloween decorations and entire neighborhoods were decorated with, you know, jack-o'-lanterns in the windows and witches on the doors. And nobody trick-or-treated. I remember when I had friends over to trick-or-treat, it was my idea, I think, because I'd seen, I don't know whether it was the Peanuts Halloween. I don't even know to be honest, I don't even know if I saw the Peanuts Halloween special. No, I think I had the record, which had it on it, if I record. You know, remember how they used to get records of shows, like LPs, like vinyl records, before there was Betamax or VHS? Anyway, I was conscious of it, or it might have been a Happy Days episode, which I still remember very fondly. The Potsy in his skeleton suit had a massive impact on me. My mother made me a Potsy-like skeleton suit one Halloween, but other kids didn't do it. We go door to door trick-or-treating, and people would be like, "What? Trick-or-treat? What? Oh, that's that stupid American thing. Get out of here!" And then, of course, we'd be vengeful upon their houses with eggs and shaving cream and everything else. But it really was an uncelebrated holiday in Australia when I was a child. So it's always been extra special, I think, to me because of its weirdness or its insignificance in Australian culture, but it was always so significant to me. But you would have grown up like in suburbs where it just lit up like the local towns near here do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a pumpkin patch this year that I'm very proud of and that my daughter adores because she's a big fan of Charlie Brown. It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, whatever Halloween episode is. So she wanted a Linus-style pumpkin patch. So we'll carve some. She actually was very specific. She wants to leave some of the pumpkins in there still on the vine so she can go out. So she can go out on Halloween and stand in the pumpkin patch.
See if there's a great pumpkin going to show up.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, she's probably seen that episode. We own most of those 60s, 70s, and 80s Peanuts movies and TV shows because I obviously made sure my daughter grew up raised in the joys of Peanuts. So yeah, we'll be standing in the pumpkin patch here on Halloween night. What about you? Any spooky or fun Halloween tales from your past?
I gotta think. I don't think so. Because we just went trick-or-treating.
Well, you're a sensitive too, though. Like you, I don't think you identify necessarily as a medium or something yet, but I know you're sensitive to energies and to maybe spiritual entities or forces. And it's meant to be a time when the veil's down is something that they say. So do you feel this time of year when we're moving towards winter and where, you know, but I guess between the equinox and the solstice that there's a feeling of a change in spiritual energy? On All Hallows Eve, do you feel any disruption in the force, so to speak?
Well, when I was younger, I probably ignored it. I'm sure I did. But I'm going to tell you, since we had the full moon, just the 20th? Things have been crazy here.
Oh,
just weird stuff, though. I mean, not like haunting or like anything like that. Just odd things. It's my kids have been sick, so we're dealing with that. But you know, if you go online about your astrology sign, and mine, Virgo, it says that, you know, there's a lot of change that's going to be happening because the full moon is in Aries, which is your sign.
So, what does that mean? Was there a significance that I'm Aries and you're Virgo when that's in that the moon's in Aries for you? I mean, I have no idea. I know almost nothing about astrology.
I don't know either. I know it's good for you because you're going to be more creative and get more stuff done. And
well, that's good.
Yeah. Which you have, right?
Yeah, I had an idea for a new book today. I've got to finish the book I'm working on, but I did today have an idea for, and I got quite excited about the idea as well. I'm not even going to talk about it yet, because until I finish the current book, it's just these people who talk about all their book plans. You know what I mean? It's like it's like opinions and other things. Everybody's got one. Everybody's got the book they're writing.
So it sounds like so far astrology is pretty good at what they're saying, because it's working. Me, I'm just gonna have a big old freaking life change supposedly. So we'll see.
Wow. Does it say whether it's a good life change or negative, or
they
just
kind of left it up in the air?
Wow.
Just don't know.
I hope it's a good one.
Some of it said negative, but but it was negative at the time, but later on it's going to be good. One of those weird things.
I know when I was a kid, I was a kid of the 70s, so astrology and the New Age and all those things were becoming kind of particularly emergent, and I guess it was everywhere. I know there were like mood rings for different star signs, and everywhere you went there seemed to be star sign little scrolls you could buy out of vending machines. And so I was always interested in, I know nothing about it, but I was interested in astrology then. But I suppose as somebody now who's as you know, slightly skeptical adult, I wonder, I think I can understand how people argue, well, particular star signs based or not star signs, but astrological. I'm not even saying I agree with this, but astrological charts based on where you were born and when you were born. And maybe there's, some.
Well, that and the full moon.
Right. But I don't know if I believe in any of that. But what I do have problems thinking is that somehow every Aries is going to have the same experience as me this week, and every Virgo is going to have the same experience as you, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it's funny because you do sometimes read star signs. I know I do, and you go, "Wow, that's really that does seem kind of like
it does kind of relate to you in a way."
True, but then you wonder, is that just a good cold read? Like if I'd read, are they up in the air enough that if I read another sign or they swap the star signs around, would I have read Pisces and gone, "Yeah, that really resonates with me this week"? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's my suspicion.
Sorry, I'm chatting with Dave right now. So I'm listening.
Okay, so he's not
feeling too.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't look like we'll have our.
No, but we're going to reschedule.
We can reschedule, Dave. But so I guess we're just going to keep talking about Halloween and star signs. One of my favorite Halloween movies. In fact, let's be honest, my favorite Halloween movie is Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, and it's kind of come back into favor again. I've been a fan of that movie since I was literally a little kid. I remember seeing the advertising for it appear before I ever saw it. And I think I'd already seen the first and maybe the second Halloween with Michael Myers, and I was so excited for Halloween 3. And of course, the reason Halloween 3 disappointed so many people is because Michael Myers officially isn't in that movie. So it wasn't what people were expecting. Now he does appear on screen. I think when Tom Atkins is in a bar looking at a television, there's an ad for the Halloween marathon or something playing, and it has a picture of Michael walking, Jason and Michael walking down the stairs. But Halloween 3 is still my favorite of the entire series, and it has nothing really to do with anything of the rest of the series, but it did its best to capture the tone of Halloween, I think, to capture some of those older traditions, which I also talked about a little bit in that video, although I didn't really do the Conal Cochran speech. If nobody's seen that movie, they're probably don't know who Conal Cochran is. But my point is that film also had, when Conal Cochran, who's the great magician who plays the ultimate trick on the children, as he says, on Halloween, it talks about how the planets are right as well. And so the idea that it's funny today that we talk about star signs kind of very flippantly, but back in the day, astrological movements actually meant something at a deeper magical level. I mean, people were probably sacrificed because the planets were in certain alignments, and certainly the Bible talks about how the heavens were made to give us signs as well. So there's a biblical inference to seeing higher than our consciousness information fed to us, I suppose. Now, whether that supports the idea of star signs. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure if that's the type of signs that the Bible was talking about. But it is interesting to think that somehow, or not to think that somehow they have, whether they really have influenced us on the level they're meant to, or whether they've just guided us culturally and made us make decisions because certain planets were in certain alignment or the moon was full on a certain date. There you go. Mothman 46 has seen Halloween 3. Yes, Silver Shamrock. Now that song will start playing in my head if I let it hum a little bit. How many days till Halloween now? How many are we? Wait, 7 more days to Halloween? Is that right?
Sunday, next week.
So is that 8 more days to Halloween?
I guess so.
Yeah, 8 more days till Halloween. But no, that movie's spectacular. If nobody's seen it, if you want to watch a great Halloween movie and you haven't seen Halloween 3 and you want something for your Halloween marathon, and watch it. I watch it every Halloween. It's my go-to movie. I think I've watched Halloween 3 every Halloween for I don't even know how long, for decades now. It always sets the tone for the holiday. Do you have a favorite Halloween film?
A Halloween film?
Mm-hmm.
It's based on Halloween?
No, that you watch at Halloween. Like, is there a go-to movie for you, or is there a film you feel like watching either on the day or in the spooky season every year?
Well, my go-to is always Poltergeist.
Was that all year round, or is that just for Halloween?
All year round, probably. But for sure, Halloween.
Huh. That's a spooky
I don't know
movie.
how to think. That is always like my first go-to, though. The Entity it's jacked up, but it's a good one too.
The Entity is a very powerful movie, based on a true story as well. I remember seeing that when I was younger. It was quite impactful. Of course, the story of Poltergeist is an interesting one as far as how it was made, because it was meant to be made by Tobe Hooper, the director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's the person who's credited with directing Poltergeist, but when you watch that movie, it feels very much like a Steven Spielberg movie. He produced it. It doesn't feel like a Tobe Hooper movie at all. Dead and Breakfast is a great movie. That is a top movie.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good film. Yeah, maybe if anybody wants.
Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah,
Nightmare on Elm Street. The first one, before Freddy Krueger became kind of a parody of himself. That Nightmare on Elm Street was really effective. That initial Wes Craven, that's probably Wes Craven's best film, actually. I'm trying to think.
That one gave me nightmares as a kid.
Yeah, it did. It was. I think it might have been the first horror movie. No, that's not true, because I'd seen American Wealth in London at the cinema. I'd probably seen others. It might have been the first horror movie I went to the cinema, though, without an adult or a parent with me. Like, I think I went with early teenage friends to see Nightmare on Elm Street. And it was super effective, that film. I do like something in the spirit of Halloween on Halloween, though. I like something about the date. Like, I'm happy to watch other horror movies on Halloween as well. But if I can pull out either the original John Carpenter Halloween, still always worth watching on Halloween as well.
Well, of course, Charlie Brown. I have to watch that.
Yeah, you have to
but
watch.
That's not scary.
No, but it sets the tone. I even like Finding the Old Happy Days, the Potsy episode where he's in the skeleton suit.
That's a good one too.
Oh, Salem's Lot is a good movie, Mothman 46. The book's good too. I'm not even a massive Stephen King fan. Like, I'm really not. I read probably most of the fiction he wrote for the first 30 years of his career, and I think it got worse and worse. But those early books like Salem's Lot and Carrie and Cujo and what else were some of those early Stephen King books? They were all his best books were the books he wrote early up. And Salem's Lot's a great book, and it's also a great spooky. Was it originally a TV miniseries, Salem's Lot? I got a feeling the initial Salem's Lot might have been a 2-parter on television. Did it have who was the star? That was like David Jansen or somebody? I'm trying to think now. I know the vampire kind of looked more like the Nosferatu vampire than the vampires that we usually get in pop culture. So the vampire was super creepy and inhuman looking in that initial Salem's Lot. Yeah. Can you? I don't know if maybe they've remade it. Have they remade something?
Oh, I'm sure they have. They
I'm talking about the old one from, I don't know, early to mid 80s, which was a TV. I think it was like I said, I think it was a two-parter on television.
I'm Googling.
If anybody knows, feel free.
Yes, there was. It says TV miniseries, 1979.
Was it David Jansen? Was that the star of that?
Mm-hmm.
If you're on IMDb or something.
Mm-hmm. Waiting for it to pop up.
Okay.
Okay. Stars: David Soul.
David Soul. That's who I meant. Yeah. Why did I say who's David Jansen when he's at home? Getting my 70s actors confused, apparently. But there you go. What year did you say it was? 79? Is that when it was?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Okay. Yeah.
TV miniseries.
Yeah, I remember that creeping me out when I was a kid. The first It miniseries too, which ironically, speaking about Halloween 3, the director of Halloween 3 was also the director of that It miniseries. Not the I've never seen the remake. I don't go out of my way to watch a lot of remakes, but I remember enjoying the first It miniseries as well, which I think had John Boy Walton, didn't it?
I don't know. Google's my friend. Have a look. Movie?
Yeah, I never watched the It film. I just watched the TV miniseries back in the day.
Okay.
Which was directed by the director of Halloween 3. With John Boy Walton, if I recall, playing the adult lead.
1990.
That might be. You know what? That might be when it came out. Yeah.
Tim Curry played Pennywise.
Yeah, Tim Curry played the clown. And who? Just go down the list. Like who was the actor who played John Boy Walton? I should know.
There's a Jonathan Brandis.
Just read down the list.
Seth Green was in it.
Just read down the list.
John Ritter.
John Ritter was in it. He also was in the Waltons, funnily enough. He played the pastor in the first couple seasons who came to Walton's Mountain, all highfalutin at first, and then he became part of the community. Married the school teacher. I'm showing my Waltons fanboy roots now. Such a great series. If anybody wants to watch a truly great series, forget, I don't know, Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. Watch the Waltons. Waltons is top shelf TV entertainment. Anyway, go. Yeah.
Richard Thomas.
Yeah, Richard Thomas. That's John.
Earl
Yeah, that's John Boy Walton. Yeah.
Yeah, that's him.
But I know I think people who saw that when they were kids were quite impacted by it, but it took a bit of heat. What's the director's name again? Tommy Lee Wallace writes the director. If you're on IMDb.
Yeah, there's a Tommy Lee Wallace and Lawrence D. Cohen.
Yeah, Tommy Lee Wallace.
Well, that's written by, yeah.
Yeah, he's a director of Halloween.
Director Tommy Lee Wallace, yeah.
Although in some ways, Halloween 3 plays more like a John Carpenter movie than a John Carpenter movie. Like John Carpenter was the producer of Halloween 3. And for those who don't know, and I think everybody knows now, when John Carpenter launched the Halloween series and they started to make more Halloween movies, he had the idea of doing a different Halloween movie every year with an entirely different storyline, just a Halloween-based storyline, but nothing to do with Michael Myers. And Halloween 3 was the first attempt to do that out of Halloween 1 or Halloween 2. And leave that up on the screen for a minute because I'll address that in a second. Halloween. So after Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, which was really the story of Michael Myers, it finished in Halloween 2. I mean, he gets burnt to a crisp by Loomis. It really should have been the end. So in Halloween 3, Carpenter thought this would be cool. Every year we'll do a different Halloween movie. We'll call it Halloween 3, Halloween 4, Halloween 5, and onwards. And we'll just have a different Halloween-orientated horror movie. But of course, when Halloween 3 dropped, everybody going to the cinema expected to see Michael Myers front and center. And when they didn't, people were seriously disappointed. But I don't think any serious horror film critic would now argue that there was a better Halloween movie than the first and then the third. They were the two greatest Halloween movies. They're really the only Halloween movies really worth watching. And all the other Michael Myers movies, as much as I enjoy them, are pretty much junk. So, the second one's fun just to see how it plays out. But the two great movies are Halloween 1 and Halloween 3. So it's a shame Carpenter didn't get his desire to keep making different Halloween themed. They could have done a fairy movie. They could have done a Halloween fairy horror movie. How cool would that have been? Mate, that would have come probably if the audience hadn't been so.
Fairy horror movies besides Leprechaun?
That's a good question. Are there any? There aren't even that many fairy movies. There's that one which kind of I think is meant to. I haven't seen it for so long. I think maybe Mel Gibson's the father and he goes away to war or something. And then is it based on the Coddingsley fairy photos or something? The two little girls befriend fairies and take photos or whatever. You know, those famous photos that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle made famous. One of them's in the video that we just watched, actually, with the girl, the black and white photo of the girl with the little fairy cutout. She's holding a hand out to it. These girls in, I guess, late Victorian or early Edwardian England hoaxed these fairy photos. They cut fairies. Everybody probably knows this, but it's a cool story anyway. They cut fairies out of, I think, a fairy book that was quite popular at the time, or that they had, and then they took photos of them with the fairies, you know, around their faces. I guess they had sticks and stuck it into the dirt. Anyway, I think there's a film based on that story. But as far as a fairy horror movie, I don't think so. That would be cool. Incidentally, Bernard Weekend just wrote Phantasm was good, or the original Hills Have Eyes. The original Hills Have Eyes is great, and Phantasm is my favorite horror franchise. Like any movie franchise which has, you know, more than one or two stories in it, so, you know, an actual horror series, Phantasm is my favorite. My very good friend Kerry Pryor, who has been a guest on this show, was actually the guy who did the balls, I believe, in the famous Phantasm spheres. He didn't do them in the first movie, but he did them, I believe, in the second, third, and maybe even the fourth Phantasm. So when I was in Cleveland staying at his house, when we were making a film down there, he had one of those Phantasm balls, which he made. It was, you know, the silver sphere. It was in his office, which was pretty cool. Silver Bullet is a top movie. Actually, I'm writing something at the moment. I mentioned that movie and what I'm writing at the moment. Who's the girl in it? It's the girl who was Anne of Green Gables. Is it Megan Follows? She's really great in Silver Bullet. She does a good job in that movie. In fact, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Have I read Silver Bullet? That might be one of the books King wrote in that first 20, 30 year run that I actually haven't read. Have I read Silver Bullet? I can't remember. Yeah, I'd love to have one of those original spheres as well. I did used to have a sphere set that they had, I think, in the UK. I don't have it anymore. I got lost somewhere over the years, but it wasn't a real sphere, but it was a DVD set of the first. I don't know if it had it. Maybe it only had the first 4 Phantasms, and I don't think it had Phantasm Ravager. But it was a sphere that you opened, and it had like the sphere with the prongs. But you opened the sphere, and the discs were actually sitting in the first 4 movies. The coolest DVD collectible set I've ever seen. But yeah, I'd love to have an actual sphere. Kerry Pryor, I don't think he'd let that sphere go. I think it's probably one of his coolest possessions. He worked in a lot of different films, so he's got all kinds of practical effect props in his office, but certainly the Phantasm sphere was my favorite, obviously, as a fanboy.
There was Gary Busey and Corey Haim was in Silver Bullet.
Yeah, but Megan Follows was the female lead, right? I think Gary Busey was the uncle who built Corey Haim his souped-up wheelchair motorcycle thing.
Yeah, she's down there.
Yeah. And Megan Follows was the sister. So I think the narrator, I think, was meant to be when Corey Haim was grown up. Silver Bullet's a great film. And a lot of Stephen King adaptations aren't great, to be honest. Like, he doesn't adapt that well. Then again, there are the greats, obviously, but then you've got people like Stanley Kubrick or Brian De Palma directing them. Like movies like The Shining or Carrie are absolutely spectacular movies. Audrey Blood says, I love the It mini series and The Stand a lot more. I'm a big Stephen King fan. I've never seen, they remade The Stand. I saw that initial Stand mini series and thought it was fantastic back in the day, but didn't they redo a Stand series recently? I'm pretty sure there's a new Stand series in the last 5 or so years, but this maybe Audrey was talking about the same Stand I'm talking about, which is probably, 20 years old now, but it was a top mini series. It was so good. It had that kid from Parker Lewis Can't Lose, I think. What was that actor? I think he was in the Stand movie. You got your IMDb open. He was the one seduced by like the demonic woman who'd been sent to, who was the bad man called in The Stand? Was it just the bad man? Whatever the devil was meant to be. I think she was meant to be an agent of him, and she seduced that poor kid and went along with the evil. I haven't seen the show now for since it came out.
They redid it in 2020.
Yeah, I haven't seen the 2020 version. When was the original version? Like 1990 something? I'm guessing. Late 90s, maybe? Mid to late 90s? Anyway, that was the version I saw.
1994.
Yeah, that's the version I saw. That was good.
Gary Sinise.
Yeah, he was the main good guy. I think he was the
Molly Ringwald. Rob
That's
Lowe.
right. Gosh, I forgot they weren't even in it. I can't remember whoever the kid was in Parker Lewis Can't Lose. For some reason, I forgot those really good actors. Not saying the Parker Lewis kid isn't good, but he's the only actor I could remember. I forgot the bigger names that were in it, like Sinise and Lowe. Speaking of Rob Lowe, man, that series, the Lowe Files,
paranormal one with his kids.
the Lowe Files, right? That I think that's the greatest paranormal television series ever made, with the exception of maybe Hellier. It's such a fantastic, it's such an entertaining show.
Well, it's kind of like a family show because he can venture out with his kids,
it's
and
so good.
Yeah.
And it used to have Don't Fear the Reaper. Since they've re-released it, like they have it officially released now, I think on YouTube or Prime or somewhere. But when it was on television, they used to have Don't Fear the Reaper as the opening credit song. Now they've got something else. It's the same way Duck Dynasty got rid of the ZZ Top song when they went into later releases on video and put some other lame music in. But that initial, it just set the tone so well. The Don't Fear the Reaper and him and his kids in the most, the coolest moments from the show, and those kind of hero shots. Man, that show used to get me excited every time I watched it. It was so good. And Rob Lowe seemed always so sincere, like he just seemed so genuine, which was great fun. And you know what? I wish they were still doing that so we could try to get Rob Lowe on
good luck on that one.
Well, he's not going to do it now because his publicist isn't going to throw him to us now. Well, we got Dakota Layden back in the day. Now, admittedly, I played a Dakota film, but that just went through the publicist. Prince of Darkness was a weird movie. Bernard Weekend. It's one actually, I love that movie. I think there's a name for them. I think it's like the Apocalypse trilogy or something. There's 3 John Carpenter movies, which are meant to be not really related in story, but were related thematically. And I think it's Prince of Darkness. I think it's, I don't know if They Live is one of them or not. And I think the other one might be, what's the Lovecraftian one? It's Mouth of Madness. I think they might be the 3. Although maybe I'm wrong with They Live. Maybe there's another one, which is which is referred to as the Apocalypse trilogy. But Prince of Darkness is great because it has this wonderful, I don't know, this kind of this scientific approach to a supernatural demonic force, and then it becomes super apocalyptic, and the strange messages coming through from the future warning about this kind of antichrist future. I think Carpenter was at his, I don't know if he was at the height of his craft as a visual director, but I think he was at the height of his craft as a cerebral director. Alice Cooper was good in that movie in Prince of Darkness as that creepy homeless guy. I think he impaled somebody in a bike seat or something, didn't he, if I recall?
Rose Red was one of my favorites.
I did watch Rose Red. Rose Red was good. In fact, there was a lot. Was that Mick Garris? I think I talked to Mick Garris back in the day when I ran a night of horror. I think we were talking about bringing him out or bringing one of his shows out or something. I know Mick Garris did a lot of those big mini series that came out in the, I don't know, mid 90s to early 2000s. I know Mick Garris ended up doing Masters of Horror. He was, I think, the executive producer of that series. Can you remember Masters of Horror? Where it was a wonderful conceit. It was that every episode they would get a major horror director to direct kind of a 1 hour long mini movie. So they had Carpenter and Dario Argento, and I think Garris himself did one. Don Coscarelli, the director of Phantasm, did one. Takeshi Miike did one that was actually banned on television because the content was so strong, if I recall. Because I think it ran on like Showtime or something, and then they released the DVDs as well. They were actually sponsors. That's why I think I ended up talking to Mick Garris for some reason. The actual Stars Anchor Bay were a sponsor of, I think, the first 2 years of a Night of Horror Film Festival, which incidentally, I should do a quick plug. A festival called a Night of Horror International Film Festival, which I founded. And now there's somebody else who manages it and is the festival director, Bryn Tilley, who does a great job. But this year, because of the ridiculous COVID restrictions in Sydney, Australia, they were forced to go online. Now, the good news for international people means that I think you can actually watch 3 of the shorts programs. They're pretty affordable. So if you go to a nightofhorror.com, you can, I think, buy a pass for all 3 of those short programs, or you can just buy a ticket for any shorts program. But because of a licensing, I don't think people overseas can watch the actual feature films. But if you're in Australia, that's streaming nationwide for anybody in Australia watching this. So maybe if you want to watch a cool little horror program for Halloween, because I think it screens through till Halloween in Australia the 31st. So why don't you check out a nightofhorror.com and watch all of their programs? And I think Bryn does a great job now with that festival. Thanks, Bernard, for the question. Dean, what are your thoughts on any of the Rob Zombie movies? Rob Zombie, for me, is a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not a massive fan of his 2 Halloween movies. Let's start there. Not because I don't think that they're powerful movies. To be honest, I've said a few times, I think if they were branded as something else, if we just didn't call them Halloween, if we just pretended it wasn't Michael Myers and it was, I don't know, they were called the Halloween Killer or something, and we didn't, Michael Myers was called, I don't know, Joe Sixpack instead, I think they'd be more effective movies. I think, for me at least, I have an expectation of the original Halloween movies, and I don't like the interference with that mythology. I don't like that in the first Halloween movie, we tried to humanize Michael Myers and have him as a kid who's kind of raised in a, a disruptive household or an abusive household, and he has all these problems, and so he turns into the monster Michael Myers. I think the great strength of John Carpenter's vision was that Michael Myers was just this shape. He was just this literal presence of evil. And like the wonderful speech by Donald Pleasance, who plays Loomis in both of those movies, is, he looked into his eyes and there was nothing there. It was just pure evil. It wasn't a person you were dealing with in those first 2 movies. So to humanize him for in the Rob Zombie movies was disappointing. I was never a fan of Rob Zombie's directorial debut, House of a Thousand Corpses. It didn't, for a couple of reasons. One, it didn't feel to me like a movie set in the 70s. It was meant to feel like a 70s movie, and it wasn't shot like a 70s movie. I don't know, the colors, it just didn't feel like a 70s movie. It felt like somebody doing a really poor job of trying to do a 70s movie. I'm not even sure if I picked up on them trying to do a job at all. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like the nasty nihilism of that movie. That said, the sequel, House of a Thousand Corpses, which is also incredibly, not House of a Thousand Corpses, the sequel is Devil's Rejects to House of a Thousand Corpses, while probably equally nihilistic, looks like a 70s movie. It feels like a 70s movie from the opening credit sequence until the very end. It's the color choices, the costume choices, the performances. I think that movie is actually a modern thriller/horror masterpiece. I do think that movie's spectacular. I haven't watched a lot of Zombies' later stuff. It's funny you asked me that question, though, because last night, for the first time, I was here at home and I just made myself a burger and fries. Not a particularly thrilling insight into my Friday night, but that's what I done. I sat down in front of the old Amazon Prime and I pulled up Lords of Salem, which I started to watch. I'd never seen it before. And I thought it was pretty powerful. I mean, it had some disturbing imagery. I didn't finish it because a burger and fries doesn't take me an hour and a half to eat. So I was probably less than halfway through that film when I turned it off. I might finish it, but it was certainly, I thought it was interesting to see his wife, Sherry Lee Zombie, in a very different role to the baby roles I was used to, the characters called in Devil's Rejects and House of a Thousand Corpses. I think she plays Michael Myers' mother in Halloween, doesn't she, if I recall? Also as some weird kind of white trash trailer park woman or something. I haven't seen Zombies Halloween since it first came out. But yeah, I think Zombies certainly a director who has talent, but I think he's a little hit and miss. That's my take on Rob Zombie films. Yeah.
Well, I remembered a movie that used to scare the crap out of me when I was a kid.
Well, tell me.
It just popped up. Well, it's old. Well, not that old. 74, so no, it's not that old.
Oh, that's old.
I found the trailer. Hang on a second.
Oh, play it. Fantastic.
I want to see what it looks like. And I was like, what? They have it.
When did you watch this movie last?
Probably in the 90s.
Okay.
Well, no, I watched it in the 2000s. Yeah.
Okay.
So. Can
you play it for us?
Yes. Hang on a second. You'll probably recognize it.
It's alive. It's alive.
Can you hear me? It can't be saved. It's gotta die.
It's alive. It's alive.
Why are you so anxious to be the one to do it?
It's alive.
Doctor! Demons are here!
It's alive.
Now, nobody knows how this thing happened. It's really a matter of speculation, and I think perhaps that's for the best. After all, if we find out that the cause is medication that we manufacture and it was administered over a long period of time, well,
What do your interests recommend?
absolute destruction of this thing.
It went down the storm drains.
That's how it can travel the length of the city without anybody seeing it.
Don't touch me. Don't you touch me. They stole my baby. Come on, get down.
Did you see it? Did you see? What does it look like?
What are you
Get
afraid
those
of?
cameras out of my face, please. I got no comment. That had nothing to do with this. Will you get that thing out of my face?
Get out of the way.
He could have killed you. You know why he didn't? You know why he didn't kill you?
Look out, Charlie!
You've never been exposed to radioactivity in radioactive material or undergone extensive x-rays. No, Doctor, I told you. Can't rule out genetic damage.
Let go of
My department has already cautioned the police about excessive violence. If it could be dispatched with a bullet or better still, some kind of a gas. Undoubtedly, it is very small, and any kind of bodily harm, especially from gunshots or explosives.
So in other words, you want me to sign away the body, is that it?
But it's your right, after all, you are the child's father.
Okay. You get the gist of it.
No,
It's a lot longer than I thought it was.
That's right. Yeah, that's a Larry Cohen film. Larry Cohen used to be one of my favorite horror directors when I was in high school, and I used to, I guess, be more interested in slightly not trashier, but weirder, lower budget fare. He did, of course, he did a movie called The Stuff. Can you remember The Stuff?
Yes, yes.
Which is fantastic. And he did Q the Flying Serpent. Can you remember that film?
Yeah, I used to
Also
watch all those
great.
cheesy.
Yeah, he's no, Larry Cohen's great. He was one of the he did one of the Masters of Horror episodes as well.
Ah,
Yeah, no, that's a good choice. Larry
Okay.
Cohen. Totally legit choice. I'm proud, baby. Good work.
yeah.
Pulling out something a little more obscure, but still masterful.
Yeah. I think the baby scared me more than anything. The rest of it was fine, but you know, I used to have I remember we had this long hallway, and when it was really, really dark, I would always see, in my mind's eye, I have a baby sitting there at the end of it, and I would always not want to look over there because I always thought it was like something like that was over there in the corner, and I'm like, I don't want to look.
They did a few of those movies, but wasn't there like 2 or 3 or 4 of those? Like, wasn't there an Island of the
think so.
Alive or something where they put the babies on an island or something? Like it was,
Yeah.
it was a mini little
Yeah.
franchise of its
Yeah.
own.
It's kind of like the Rosemary's Baby too. That was one of my favorites.
Well, Rosemary. Well, you know how we were talking before about those great directors who've worked in the horror, like Kubrick and De Palma, of course. Rosemary's Baby with is a Polanski movie, so Bernard remembers the It's Alive.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rosemary's Baby is one of probably not just one of the greatest horror movies ever made. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. It's so effective. It's so great. It's Polanski early in his game, but still, you could see just the strength of his direction in that movie. And it had there's scenes in that movie that we're so used to Steadicam and, shots which travel these days. We're spoilt by them, really. But there's a wonderful scenes early in that movie when they're walking around the apartment, which are just these handheld shots, which really pick up the kind of energy. I'm still impressed by that movie. Yeah, Rosemary's Baby is spectacular. Even though Polanski himself's is very problematic today. Forget about woke council culture. I mean, Polanski really was a predator who, who had to flee. It was actually quite funny. Remember how there was this attempt by Hollywood to let him back into the country and to let him be forgiven or whatever for, the serious crimes that he committed. And I remember Harvey Weinstein was one of the people who was trying to champion Polanski. And now when we know about the Weinstein, exploits and misdoings, there's a kind of an irony there that he was one of the people championing Polanski the hardest. So but I mean, regardless of his considerable crimes, and Roman Polanski should be in jail. I know that's not popular to say in the film community, but it's true. He should have been jailed back then for his crimes. He certainly is one of the greatest directors of the 20th century. I mean, there's no doubt. Incredibly talented director.
Yeah. Well, speaking of scary movies, I definitely think since we didn't get to talk to Dave, but he said that he can reschedule. Hopefully, this coming up, like by Wednesday, I think he said. So we'll see if we can figure something out. But his book, that I wanted to talk about, this one, this is This would be a perfect scary movie to be made. It's awesome.
Oh, the Wicked 46.
The book, his book. Yeah, sorry, I didn't explain that very well. But no, his book. If they made it into like a screenwrite, and
I know I haven't read it, but you told me about it. It sounds like it would be.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
My mother just asked me a question on Facebook. God bless my mother and my stepfather. They always watch the show. Asked me if I would consider Children of the Damned a horror movie. Yeah, it's definitely a horror movie. John Carpenter, who we were talking about, remade Children of the Damned. I think it was the last film that Christopher Reeves did before his accident when he was paralyzed, if I recall. You remember, the movie with all the blonde-headed children who kind of, I think it was based on the John Wyndham novel, The Midwich Cuckoos, if I recall. And that novel is about when everybody goes to sleep one day, they're passed out, and then all the women are pregnant, and there's been some kind of alien abduction. That's my recollection of a sci-fi nerd, of having not watched either the movie nor read the book for 20, 30 years. But I think those movies are based on Wyndham's The Midwich Cuckoos. Wyndham's also the guy who did, I believe, Day of the Triffids. So there's a real contribution to science fiction films and movies. And if I'm wrong and anybody knows it, feel free to correct me in the comments. All of that said, we're probably getting close to winding up. So if I'm wrong, nobody probably can correct me, which is every egoist's dream, to be. Not saying I'm an egoist, but maybe I guess we all are to some degree. But I definitely encourage everybody, and thank you everybody for your comments. It's so much fun to engage more, which is why it's always nice, actually, baby, when it's you and I doing the show, because I feel I don't feel right cutting away when I'm talking to a guest as much to comments or questions as when it's just you and I, where I'm happy to cut away. But like I said, next week, Heidi Erickson is going to be on chatting about, I believe, witch stories and Halloween tales. And again, she's a wonderful storyteller. She's done, what has she done with us previously? She did St. Paddy's Day, where she told St. Paddy Day stories. And there was another, I don't know if it was a thematic one.
Valentine's Day she was on.
Valentine's Day, that's right. So she's going to be a blast on Halloween. Yeah, and I encourage people, if you've got your costumes, like you're at home on Saturday, or you come back from a party, or it's before you go to a party, depending where you are on this planet, post a photo of yourself in costume on the Talking Weird page underneath the show link, and drop us, early on, particularly before Heidi gets rolling into her stories, drop some comments when it's just me and Jen at the beginning, and we'll certainly acknowledge you. And Bernard Weekend said Frankenstein meets the Space Monster, best scary movie ever. You know what? I'm actually unaware of that movie, but it does sound like it would be a blast. There are those kind of weird B grade cross genre films made, but please do tune in next week for our Halloween special, and I hope everybody's getting ready for their spooky season plans, because we're only a weekend away.
My cat wants out.
My cat
so smart. He knows how to whack the door handle. That's how you know he wants out of the room.
My cat Valet probably wants in, but he's an outdoor cat, so
Cold. Poor little
well,
baby
he's got
cat.
somewhere warm to sleep, so he's okay. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks for chatting, baby, who's disappeared. There's
the little
Mr. Doc
culprit.
Holiday.
Mm-hmm. He's just like, yeah.
Okay, well, until next week, when it's our extra special Halloween show. Thank you for listening, everybody, and watching, and most importantly of all, keep it weird.
Keep it weird.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.